Hi, welcome to our podcast, Woman of Purpose. And today we're going to continue our topic on insecurity and how insecurities can stop us from being a woman fulfilling our purpose. And today I have with us Wendy Muska.
Hi, everybody. My name is Wendy Muska. I am 50 years old and have earned every one of those years, would never go back. So say that proudly. Got 2 adult kids, and I happen to be a therapist on the side. And I'm so happy to be here with my super good friend, Shar, and my other super good friend, Becky.
And my other guest is Becky Melton.
Hi, my name is Becky. I am a mother of 4. Ranging from 14 to 27. It's kind of crazy. My first 2 children were with my first husband, so I've been divorced, and God's redeemed marriage for me. And I love being a mom. So I work in physical therapy, which is quite rewarding to watch people get better. And I just love my church family and my friends. And awesome. I'm jealous Wendy's going to be a grandma.
Not me.
Not me either.
Well, ladies, it was really, really fun to talk last time about this topic of insecurity and how important it is, especially in women, how women struggle with this thing of being insecure. And last time I read the definition of insecurity, and I'm going to read it again just so we can kind of build off of that again. And the definition is feeling inadequate, not enough, feeling inferior of others, and not confident. And insecurity, I believe, and what I want to kind of talk about a little bit is how insecurity becomes how we see things. It's like insecurity becomes that filter or lens, if you want to say, that we see things through, so that in my life, when I'm going through something, now, because I'm insecure, I view relationships through that lens. I view my situation or my circumstance through that lens of insecurity. So the question is how does insecurity then become, maybe I can rephrase this, is an insecure person looking at life or looking at my situation, how does it affect the things around me? When that's the lens that I see through.
It's like having a windshield full of dead bugs. You know, you're hoping you see the road right. You're hoping you're not going to hit a deer or whatever. You know, so it affects everything when you have that junk on your internal lens. Then you just see everything through that, and so you're not seeing it correctly.
So how do you think that it affects relationships? When I'm in a relationship, friends, romantic, whatever, any kind, even your job with your boss, how does being insecure affect those things, do you think, Wendy?
Wow, that is such a big answer. So I think it really becomes the plank that we see things through. So when we try to maneuver in our relationships, I guess in a nutshell, it's insecure people oftentimes point out the faults of others in a way of trying to make themselves feel more secure. If you feel it's hard for you to retain feedback or take feedback, if you're very secure in the kind of mother you are, like if you're like, I'm a pretty good mom for my kids, and somebody comes up to you with a new idea about mothering, you just kind of take it in. You go, oh yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that. But if you're an insecure, let's just say mother, and somebody comes up to you with a new idea about mothering, the first, you get very defensive. So I think you can really figure out what you are insecure about if you think about what you get defensive about. Because at the root of most defensiveness is insecurity. Because if somebody comes up to you and says something about the way you mother, and you say, well, what, they don't think I'm doing a good enough job? Like I'm the mother that I can be. It just causes defensiveness primarily in relationships. So we can't receive well from others. We can't be taught well from others. And who likes to be around somebody who's just always defensive?
So somebody that is insecure really lives a life of being defensive. So then everything, so that goes through that lens then. So now with being insecure, how I look at everything in life, I just live life on defense always.
Always. Yep.
So it's like you can't take any suggestions about anything.
Right.
So if I'm insecure as being a wife, or even in friendships, if I have a friend that comes up to me and is struggling, or maybe I offended them in some kind of way and they come to talk to me about it, instead of hearing it, my first response would be automatic defense.
Right.
And then probably critical, wouldn't you think?
Well, I think when you're defensive, you're not hearing it anyway.
Yeah.
It's like talking to a wall,
Yeah.
you know, because their lens and their defensive-ness keeps them so they're hearing so muffled, you know, so they're not going to hear.
Yeah,
Right.
that's true.
It's
Yeah.
really hard when you have someone like that in your life, because you have to find the opportune moment to interject something when you can tell when their defenses are down, and that they may have their lens a little cleaner, you know, so that you can just gently interject love in a way, and honoring them and guiding them to do something different.
Right.
You know, it's hard.
I
It's a
see
balance.
defensiveness. I mean, I gave an example of mothering, which women often get defensive about mothering. But I see it in marriage all the time. When a couple comes into my office for couples counseling, when your relationship has eroded to that place, there's so much defensiveness going on, and it becomes two people against each other instead of two people against a problem, where there's a security of love in that base and self-worth, and that you feel valued by each other. When that's missing from a marriage, everything becomes defensive.
Yeah.
Everything becomes, I'm not good enough. I don't get anything right. So when you try to give that in marriage, there's just always feedback. You're doing, you know, life with each other 24/7. There's just always feedback. And if your spouse is feeling insecure about their value to you, well, they take a defensive stance. And so it really breaks down problem solving in a marriage. So oftentimes when I start with a couple, one of the things I'm oftentimes telling them is start speaking life into each other.
Yeah.
Because we can really get lazy in our marriages and all of our other relationships as
Yeah.
well, and just start saying the things we're upset about.
Yeah.
And we stop saying the things we love about each other. Ew, that's so icky.
But on the other hand, too, being insecure, it's like, it's hard. Don't you think, though, that it's harder for somebody that's insecure to actually talk about and be honest and vulnerable to talk about what is bothering them, because being insecure, they automatically feel like it's their fault. So you think it falls into that victim mentality then of...
and pride,
Yeah.
you know, pride
Yeah.
keeps them there,
Yeah.
you know, and it keeps them saying, well, I don't want to admit that I'm insecure because then people are going to look at me different,
Right.
you know?
So then how can a person then dealing with somebody that has insecurities on the opposite side of that? So then if say I am in a relationship and I've got a friend that I love dearly and they're insecure, and it doesn't matter, you know, what I say or do, how can I help them get out of that insecurity?
Right.
You know, so how can I, as a friend, or if it's my husband or my boss, maybe, you know, how can I, as a person maybe that doesn't struggle so much with insecurity, help them and be that friend to them that can say, you know, ever so gently, hey, let me show you something.
Right.
You know?
Words are so important, aren't they? I mean, our lives are, and our experiences are built on words. They really are. And one of my favorite things to do with people in my own life, my personal life, and my clients, if you've ever been in my office, one of my favorite things to do is you call it out. You call out the good. You say things like, I've looked at so many husbands and said, I know that it's hard for you to struggle to help your wife manage her feelings. Girls, we got big emotions, man. They can get out of hand quick, right? But I'll look at them and I'll say, but you're perfectly equipped for that. God designed you for that. When I have somebody who's kind of constantly those negative people in your life who are always just like, oh, I don't like that about that person, or something like that, I'll say, wow, but you know, I really admire that you usually take the high road in people that bother you. I speak that life into them. And you don't always have to have declarative conversations with people where you sit them down and say, this is what you do. You just start speaking change over their life. And that's just the powerful impact of words. I mean, we use words to bless, we use words to curse, and to say, just draw that out of them. Look at your children and say, wow, I really love how patient you can be when they're being patient. Just as much as you're talking to them about being impatient, call that out. Call esteeming a spouse to say, you are perfectly equipped and designed for each other. That is good. So calling it out, I think, is one way to just call it the positive. Speak the life, speak the change over them.
Because who doesn't want to hear more of that?
Right?
You know?
Right.
Sometimes though, a person that is insecure, it's hard for them to hear that because they already don't feel like they're adequate enough or that they're good enough. And so I think the important thing is to continue filling that bucket.
Always.
Because I think an insecure person, the reason I'm talking about this topic is because I think we've all been there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We all struggle with that. And I think an insecure person can be like a bucket with holes. So the more that you pour in, then the more it leaks out. And I think being patient with that person and continually pour into them. I think number one is finding out from them, why do you feel so inadequate in our relationship? Like finding that out. And if it's a spouse, obviously, but if it's especially friendships, because they're so important for women. It's like having that girlfriend. Oh yeah. And it's if you have somebody in your life that is insecure, or if you're the one that's insecure and you're listening to this and you're like, hey, that's me, then once something is recognized and seen, then it no longer has power in your life. Once it's brought to light, so now we can deal with it and say, okay, I feel insecure in this and I don't like it, because then you feel even stupid. I mean, don't you feel stupid if you gotta admit, this, you sound like your kindergartners on the playground. You know what I mean? Like, that really made me upset, or, that hurt my feelings. It's like, it's hard for us to say, what you said or what you did hurt my feelings. I don't know why, and it shouldn't, but it did. And so when you're strong enough and you can at least muster that part of it up in your relationship, then you can actually have this conversation. And don't you think, Wendy, that when we do that as a friend to someone who's insecure, the person that is insecure then can start realizing, okay, wait a minute, I'm not broken.
Right.
Because we feel like we're broken when we're insecure, but it's not brokenness. No. What it is, it's called life. I would say, don't you think that 90% of people, especially women, that struggle with insecurity, it started when they were little.
Very, yeah.
And then you grow up with this mindset that I'm not enough. And as kids, we always know how to make it our fault. So you kind of grow up with that. So to help somebody, so when somebody realizes that, it's like a light bulb comes on and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm not broken. I've got this issue with being insecure and I don't like it. So, how can we come alongside of that person and say, hey, you've got this.
Right. I love to take the stance with all people, and I encourage it with other people, to take the stance with people in your life of seeking to understand them.
That's really good.
What's happened in their life that's causing them to act like that? Most people want to do well. I mean, if you think about the way that a child is born from, until they start being really kind of corrupted by the world, and so to speak, they're born wired and wanting and bold and confident. Some kids are more shy or introverted and those kind of things. But if you approach your relationships with this, I want to seek to understand them. And then, and I've talked about this before, we have a relationship with ourselves. Seek to understand yourself. Say to yourself, why do I continue to stumble here? Where did that come from? And oftentimes what's happened is people have taken the most critical voice that's ever happened in their life. The kids in 6th grade that bullied you. And I can tell you right now, as a 50-year-old woman, if you're older than in 6th grade being bullied at the current time, like if you're in your 20s, Those people that bullied you don't remember they bullied you.
Yeah.
But you remember everything they said. And we give all of this power to the most critical voices in our lives. And we tend to not believe the positive voices.
Yeah.
You have to shift that mindset.
And wouldn't it be a good idea though too, like if you've got this kind of like this moment of aha moment that I am insecure and I don't know what to do with it, is to find that person in your life, because I think everybody has at least that one person that you know is going to tell you the truth, that loves you enough to say, hey, I love you and I want to help you through this insecurity. I want to help you through this. I want to help to see, basically it's to help you see your value.
Right.
And help reel them in, you know, on that.
Right. You brought up women in our lives, and I'm obviously you two are some of my very best at doing that in my life. And we have to give women permission in that role in our life to do that. But one of the things that I've often done with women is if you've got some really cool friends and you really like your friends and you're insecure, you have to remember that those people are choosing to be friends with you. So you must be at least as cool as them.
Yeah.
You know, we all like to hang out with people kind of like us. So if you have women in your life that are amazing, it's like, well, you must be pretty cool because they choose you.
Yeah, that's true.
In the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the things that my insecurities, and people that know me now probably can't imagine that, but I used to be very insecure. Really approached my life from a very critical mindset. I was so critical of myself. And I had some relationships in my adulthood that just kind of cemented some of those things. But the thing that happened for me, the way that kind of played out, is I was very afraid of anything that looked like or could possibly potentially sort of kind of become confrontation. Where it was hard for me to go to people and say, oh, that really hurt or that really stung.
Because you didn't like confrontation.
I did not think I was worthy of reconnection sometimes in relationship. And I see that with people a lot. When you feel insecure about who you are, you have a lot of relationships that end before you really want them to, because you're not kind of clearing the junk out of your relationship, or you're not feeling like you're valuable enough to say to someone, oh, you know, when you constantly make plans with me and then you don't show up or you cancel last minute, I really feel like I'm not very important to you.
Yeah.
Well, if you already don't feel important, you're not going to bring that up to somebody else, right?
Right.
You're just going to fade off into the sunset.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's how it came up for me.
So the feeling worthy.
Yeah.
Becky, do you think that that's a really...
Oh, absolutely. You know, I think it kind of probably goes back to having, you know, the cool kids in school. Am I worthy to be part of that group or whatnot? But God puts his worth on us, and he says, you're worthy because I created you in my image. And I think we always have to go back to that. Like I try to redirect my friends back to that. Like, who does God say you are?
Right.
You know, God says you are beautifully and wonderfully made.
Yeah.
You know, and he didn't make a mistake making you sensitive.
Right.
He didn't make a mistake making you loud or talkative or whatever. Every attribute God has given you has a purpose for him, right? And so we have, so I think sometimes also unearthing those triggers, like if you have a friend that is insecure about something that's said, unearthing that trigger. So what's happened that triggers you to feel so insecure with a statement as simple as that, you know? Right. And like, because I love you, let's dive into this together. Just, and having, like you said, having those people in your life that will be beautifully bold, but from such a place of love. And that's the other thing. You have to, if your friend doesn't feel secure with how much you love them, they're not going to receive what you might have to say. Right. You know, so we have to be intentional with how we love our friends and whatnot. Then we're able to speak that life to them.
Right.
Yeah. I remember being in high school, and I went to a private school. So there was, it wasn't a very big school, and it was, you know, all, you know, elementary and high school, junior high, kind of all together. And I remember the people I had two girls in my class and that were in the same grade type thing. And it was a church school, you know, and it was interesting because I was insecure because, you know, growing up in a home with an alcoholic dad, you already feel like there's something wrong with your family when the other two gals, the one was the pastor's kid and the other one, you know, had her brother was the youth pastor, her brother-in-law was associate pastor. So they had, in my perspective, the family. And here I am with a dad that's an alcoholic that doesn't come to church, and just I felt broken already. And so then as a kid, a teenager, and you walk into a room where your friends, so-called friends are, and when you walk in, they're quiet. They stop talking. Or when you come up on them and you hear them talking about you.
Oof.
You know what I mean? It's like it validates all of those feelings that I'm not enough,
right?
That my family wasn't enough. And then you start thinking, what if I was them? And then you start doing things that you normally wouldn't do because you want friends so bad. You know what I mean? And so that's the power of insecurity. And then so you go from being in junior high school, and then you go into adulthood, and it affects even the guys you pick to date.
Oh, for sure.
Because this is what you're worth. I'm worth this because my so-called friends validated that in me because my family's not enough. I'm not enough. Something's wrong with me. And so then you pick relationships that, that are not good for you because
exactly.
I'm not good enough.
Right.
And then, you know what I mean? You see that downhill thing, and then you get into adulthood, and then it just, if you don't deal with it or recognize it. And I'm so thankful that now things are talked about more than back then. So many things is kind of like, just, suck it up and go on with life. I can't tell you how many times I heard that, just suck it up. And so I became very angry, and you talked about being critical. I was critical with people because that's how I looked at myself.
Exactly.
I was so critical with myself, and so coming out of that, that's why I'm so passionate about exposing this thing so that women don't have to take it through their whole life.
That's right.
We can have a moment of being insecure where it's just like, but we recognize it and go, okay, wait a minute.
What triggered that?
What triggered that?
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Right. Junior high, man, is there any girl that would go back to junior high? Like if you are a younger girl and you are listening to this, we really need to do better as a culture of women, of not having women become real passive aggressive sometimes, and they do that. And I've seen adult women do that, where they're trying to ostracize one woman because maybe that woman pushes another person's button. Lots of times we want other people to stop doing what they're doing because of how it makes us feel. Right. So one of the things that I say a lot to the teen girls that are in my office is, I wish somebody would have parked me in front of a therapist. When I was their age, I would have made so many less mistakes as an adult.
Yeah.
So now when these younger girls are seeking a voice, and I think one of the things that causes me to have such passion also for people's freedom is my own brokenness and not having a guide out of that brokenness, not having a voice in my life out of that brokenness. Junior high is a rough time for girls, my goodness. And women, we need to spend time checking the way that we interact with other women. If you are a woman that when you see somebody else, the first thing you think to do is criticize them and say, I don't know why she's wearing that skirt. That looks awful on her. Oh my gosh, look how big her butt is, or whatever. Do better. Be better. We need to be better.
And it's not about it's not doing it because someone's watching. It's doing it because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
It's not kind to be. Matthew 7 always runs through my mind. We will be judged at the measure in which we judge. I just simplify it, and I think to myself, oh gosh, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be judged. But I was that person. I think we probably all were at some point where, but as far as like back in our generation with middle school, you don't talk about your feelings. And now all they talk about are their feelings.
Which could be a bad thing as well.
The pendulum is swung so far the other direction.
That
it's all about feelings and what they're doing. And when middle school, when they hit puberty, that's the second time in your life that your brain does the most transitioning from when you were newborn. That first year is the most your brain changes. And then when you go through puberty is the most your brain changes. And all of a sudden these kids are feeling things they weren't feeling before that process.
Right.
And they don't know how to process that. And
Right.
that's when they should be sat in front of Wendy.
Right.
Yeah.
Or a counselor
true.
to process through. Because I
Right.
remember processing through with my boys, not really having that understanding with Taylor. Sorry, Taylor. But with, I had read an article about that. And so when one of my sons was going through feeling like, I feel angry, I feel this, I feel that. Why do I feel these things? And when you can simplify it to his hormones or whatever, and to just keep them talking through that, then they're like, okay, I'm not crazy. My brain changed. I'm not crazy. Right. But it's as a parent, it's processing that so that they don't make really poor choices that then follow them for their years. Yeah.
The hard thing when you look at that brain development is there's such impulsivity. There's, and we don't need to go into the neuroscience of that, and that is exactly when parents start giving their kids more rein.
Yeah.
So their body is going through this big burst of growth, right? And that's exactly when parents stop monitoring their sleep, monitoring how well they're eating, and then all of a sudden they've got this grumpy, grouchy teenager, right? And we need to be more intentional about that. But I would say that it's really good also for women to realize that relationships with women are very important. We're much more relational than men are in many aspects. We have a great need for that. Women throughout history have had this beautiful community of women. I mean, I love the history of the culture of women. We have been pretty amazing. But what I find is so many women don't spend the time cultivating relationship. They don't spend time with each other and make that a priority. Like, if people are enjoying our podcast, which I hope they are, but what they're seeing is 3 women who have spent years cultivating relationship with each other, intentionally saying, I haven't seen you in a while. I need to be face to face with you, having 3-hour coffee dates, And we've done that with each other, and that's why we get what we get out of our relationships. Yeah. So you have to make that a priority. Yeah. And even though it's a Tuesday night and you feel like you just don't want to do anything, you have to make it a priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really good. Mm-hmm. And so we talked about, how insecurity is a lens that we see through. Mm-hmm. And so it's as women dealing with women and women with a purpose, because every single woman has a purpose. Mm-hmm. And I believe that if we allow insecurity to continue in our life and not deal with it, then we will never get to that point of walking in that purpose, which I believe adds on to the not feeling enough. Because we don't feel like we're enough or valued enough because we're not walking in our purpose. And we're not walking in our purpose because I'm so insecure that I don't really believe that I have a purpose, And so it's important that as we're seeing through this, we were talking earlier about listening to understand. And it's like if I'm dealing with insecurity, it's like take that bold step and speak to be understood. I can't tell you how many times that I've been misunderstood. I think all of us have been misunderstood, but an insecure person we don't want to talk about it because you don't want to make waves, maybe,
right?
Or make them feel more insecure,
or make them feel more insecure.
It is on us as a person to, if I have a thing that I struggle with, and it is on me to tell people that that's a thing for me. A little bit, you have to be work through that insecurity to be able to say that. But for me to find my self-worth enough to say, hey, I'm feeling like you're upset with me and we're not connecting. I need to speak that, because oftentimes we don't say things, but then we gain resentments for the fact that we're not getting what we want out of relationships. But you have to speak what you need. Right. People can't read your mind. Right. We need to speak what we need. And I've shared my insecurities with my friends. So oftentimes now, they soothe my insecurities. They help me with that. Yeah. As I'm working through really kind of booting that out of my mind, they'll help me through that. But it's only because I've shared what those were with them. Yeah. We have to be bold enough to be a little bit more transparent to say, I struggle with this. Yeah. This is the way I feel about myself. I struggle with these things. Yeah.
And that's good. And coming from a home life like I did, as we're talking about this, it's funny because as we're talking about it, don't you guys feel like stuff come up? Or just me?
That's Holy Spirit, girl.
No, I'm just like,
say it, work it. Yep.
Yeah.
Dang it, I thought I dealt with that. But it's like growing up in a home where your voice didn't matter. And anytime you went to say something, you were hushed. or you were demeaned, or you were belittled, or, being with friends that were smarter than you, and, you go to say something and they make you feel stupid because you're not as smart as them. It makes it harder to want to put your heart out there and become vulnerable and authentic with somebody, even though you know that they love you. There's still that fear. Yeah. Where it's like, oh my gosh, if I do this, they're going to think that, does my voice matter? Does what I have to say matter? Or am I just stupid? All of those things are like going through my heart. Even now, I'm just like, oh man, this is just so dumb. But it's so good, because the more that we get this stuff out there, the more that we can actually, the more free that we become as women, the more impact we have on those that aren't free yet.
Right. Amen.
And then we can actually say, no, I've been there. And so any woman that is listening to this podcast today and talking about how insecurity becomes how we see life through, if you're insecure, then your circumstance and your situation that you're in is more magnified than it really is. It's like, if we would take a step back, we would realize that there's somebody else in my life that's actually going through something worse than I am. Right. But it's hard for me to see because my insecurity causes me to see my situation as being I'm the only one, And so it's so important that if you're listening to this, number one is know that what you're going through is important.
Yes.
It matters. But on the other side is that if you're dealing with insecurity, that you are enough. And it's to find somebody that you trust and you value. And if you're like, well, I don't have anybody in my life I trust, but that's I would say that's a lie. There's got to be somebody. And if you truly feel like you don't, then find a therapist. There's so many amazing, beautiful counselors that can help you get that out of you, so that you can be able to take a hold of this insecurity and say, you know what, this insecurity is no longer going to dictate my life. I'm going to take my life back. Because we've given this insecurity power, is what we've done. Right. And so now this insecurity dictates to me how I'm going to feel, how I'm going to love, how I'm going to have relationships with people. Right. Right. And so the frustration can stop today as we take a hold of this insecurity and take a hold and own it. I think one of you said that too, is we own it. I own it. I grew up insecure, maybe not even because of me, but because of things, just life. But I still have to own it. Right. And the way I treated people and the way, the way I looked at things. And so today, if you're listening, I just want to empower you that you can be free from this. And we talked about finding your people, finding the ones that are close to you. And if you don't, then find a counselor. Go online. There's many, many great counselors out there that can really help you. So anyways, I want to thank you guys for joining us today on this episode of our Woman of Purpose podcast, dealing with the topic of insecurity. So we still have more to say. So join us for the next episode.